If you sat through my incredibly long last video that was all about why is HTML needed, here's your reward, a relatively short and straight to the point video that's just about what HTML is and how it works. So HTML, you've probably at least heard that beautiful sequence of letters. HTML, usually they're saved as files, which are, yes, if you look at them, open them in a plain text editor, you'll see that they're totally readable as plain text. Plain text was the subject of my last video, but you should totally go watch, even though it's very long. Usually they're saved as .html or .htm files, and HTML stands for, like, here we go back to the 90s. It sounds very futuristic from the 90s, hypertext markup language. Hypertext markup language, that's what it stands for. If you watched the last video, you should have a sense of what markup means. And hypertext, you can imagine it means linking, going from one text to another, hypertext. So HTML allows you to do all kinds of things that plain text does not. It allows you to change typography, to display images, and the most revolutionary part of it from the 90s perspective is to link to other pages. It's kind of cool when you think about it. In books you can't do this. You can't just like touch a word on a page and suddenly you're somewhere totally different. But HTML allows you to do that. We're so used to it now that it doesn't feel exciting, but in the 90s it was. Web browsers, like I'm using Chrome, but like Safari, Firefox, etc., their job is to read an HTML file, which they take in as a plain text file, to interpret it, and then to display the web page according to their interpretation of the code. So as an English professor, it really excites me that HTML is code, and then web browsers are interpreters. They're like the readers. They have to take the codes and turn them into meanings. HTML is open and cross-platform compatible. It's revolutionized all kinds of stuff, like no longer you can share files from Windows, PC, Linux. It all works fine. We all need to be able to understand and read HTML. That's why we can have things like Google Docs that allow you to work on any different computer system and work together, because it's all just HTML. It was invented in 1990, HTML, that is, by Tim Berners-Lee, who was a physicist at CERN in Switzerland. It's kind of cool to be the person who invented something as important as HTML. Okay, so in the last video we talked about some hypothetical markup schemes that my students came up with, like how could you use plain text in order to overcome the limits of plain text and say, here's a bolded passage or whatever. So my students, if you look at that last video, came up with some pretty good ideas, but HTML is kind of better. Sorry, students. HTML is pretty simple, okay? This is what is called an HTML element, this full thing. Okay, and the HTML element is made up of 3 parts. First, you have a start tag, and here you can see this is the syntax. You got pointy brackets on either side, and then an element name, as it's called here. The element is called tag. This is a terrible pun, I'm sorry, a tag you're it, but whatever, it's a good example. So the start tag looks like that, and then the end tag looks just like this, except it has a forward slash. That forward slash after the pointy bracket means end. This is the end of the tag element. The thing in the middle is the element content. So the way that an HTML element works is that you've got like data in the middle, and then the HTML tags at the start and end are supposed to add some kind of information. In this hypothetical example, no real data is being added, but you'll see in a second. So this one, for instance, let's say instead of using the hypothetical HTML element tag and use the real HTML element EM, which is what is used to show emphasis, and usually browsers see EM and turn it into italics. So what's going on here is that we're taking the words you're it, which is the data, and we're adding some extra data about them. We're saying, you know what, this stuff in the middle is emphasized stuff. So an extra layer of data. So note again, start tag EM, the end tag matches but has a forward slash in it. Whew, here's a long one. Okay, this is the most important HTML element, okay? Know this one. A, the HTML element A stands for a link. I think it's just A because you need to make a lot of links, and A is the first letter of the alphabet and it's really short, so it's easy to type. So here you can see that some HTML elements are actually way more complicated than just a start tag with pointy brackets on either side and a matching end tag. Some of them have extra info, which, as you can see here, is a link to a web page. So if you were to see this in a browser, you'd see click here, and then the word here would be like underlined and in a different color, and then by clicking on it, you would be taken to this website. So here's how this extra info works. So sometimes in an HTML element, you have an attribute. Like think about if we didn't have an attribute on a link and just said A, like click here. So here would appear as a link, but if you clicked on it, how are you supposed to know where it's taking you to, right? Like you need to know not just here is a link, but here is a link to something. So this is how we add the extra info. href, which I imagine means something like hypertext reference, i.e. this link is pointing me to, so you have the name of the attribute, then this is the same for all HTML elements with attribute values, an equals sign, and then quotation marks on either side surrounding the link. So we'll play with this a bit more in a second, but this is how links work in HTML, and this is an example of a longer, more complicated HTML element, not just with a start tag and an end tag, but also with attributes and attribute values. And yes, some elements can have lots of different attribute values. It'd just be like a space here and then more attributes and attribute values. Notice that the start tag is just A, and even though there's all this extra stuff at the beginning of the start tag, still the close tag is just simple. You just still a /A. You don't need to worry about like slashing all that stuff. Okay, so now I will show you, I sort of hinted at this at the very end of my last video, a bare minimum web page. This is the absolute minimum that you need to have in any web page, okay? You have to have, you can't just jump straight into just say like writing you're it and putting an EM tag around it and it would turn it italics. There's a certain structural minimum that you need to have in a website because HTML, in addition to allowing you to do things like bold and italics, is a way of describing the structure of a document. So let's go back and have a look at that. Like, see how structured this document is. First of all, the first line is just telling a browser, whoever's looking at this, hey, this is a specific document type, but this is an HTML document. Then the first element in any HTML file is called HTML. And notice it doesn't end until there. The start tag is all the way up there, and it ends there, meaning that it contains, I'm going to collapse the HTML element. Inside the HTML element is everything in the document. Then there's a section of this document called head, which contains like specialized information about the page, not the actual contents of the page, but just info about the page. So here you'll notice I've got a title element saying the title of my web page, which is a bare minimum web page. And I'm gonna, you can write anything you want in there. Then body. So we're dividing this page into head, which is where like info about the page is stored, and then body, which is the actual body of the page, and this is what's going to appear in the window of your web browser. And then I've got a paragraph. That's what P means, meaning hello world. So I'm just going to load this up in Chrome, and you can see what it looks like as interpreted by a web browser. Okay, code in Text Wrangler, my plain text editor. This is where I'm writing the code, and Chrome, a web browser, interprets this code and turns it into something that can be displayed. So I'm going to open up a file. I'm going to open up bareminimum.html, which is that file I was just editing in Text Wrangler. And okay, you see how it's being interpreted? All of the pointy brackets are gone. It's just interpreting those. And it even like took, I said the title of the page is a bare minimum web page, and it put it up there. Ooh, how come these exclamation points aren't there? It's because I didn't go file save. I'm going to do this on my keyboard a lot in these videos just to make it fast, Command S or Control S. If I reload it, you now see that those exclamation points are up there. And it only displays this one paragraph, hello world. So HTML is about describing the structure of a document. In this case, my minimum page is a very simple document. It has a head and a body, and the body has one paragraph, and that paragraph just says hello world. Now CSS, the subject of my next video, works together with HTML to alter the appearance of particular parts of the document, but let's just set that aside. Like right now, sadly, HTML, I can't do that much fun color stuff. But in the next video, you'll get to see how CSS is the greatest and it can do all that kind of stuff. Okay, some rules. Sadly, yes, there are lots of rules you need to follow with any kind of coding. So some rules about HTML. Everything in an HTML document needs to be properly nested. You can't have overlapping tags. Let me show you what I mean. So in that file I just showed you, you've got the HTML file. You start tag HTML and the close tag HTML at the bottom, and then everything needs to be nicely nested within it. So you got head, and then you close head. Then you start body, and then you start P and close P before you close body. Here's what you can't do. You can't do something like start a P tag and then start a body tag and then close your P tag. If you're going to start P up here, you need to close it before you start something else. This is what's called an overlapping tag. It's not properly nested. You got to think of like Russian dolls. Russian dolls have the top parts and the bottom parts, and the top parts are like the start tag and the bottom parts are like the end tag, and everything needs to fit very neatly within one another. If you break any kind of rules, like, okay, I'm starting my P tag within body, that means I need to close it within body, or I'm going to create like a hierarchical catastrophe. Can't do it. HTML gets upset. Another way of looking at nesting, the Russian doll example is probably the best in thinking of start tags and end tags and the way everything needs to be very neatly folded within one another. But you can think of it as everything in an HTML file is placed within what is called an ordered hierarchy. So like the one that we're making right now, HTML is the main element, and then it branches into head and body. And then like title is within head, which is within HTML. See how it's very hierarchical? You've got like an EM element, which is within the P, which is within the body, which is within HTML. You can't have an EM element that is both within and outside. You know, EM, this element can't be here and there. It needs to be really clear what the hierarchy is, or HTML will get really confused. So you might hate hierarchies and you might use HTML to destroy hierarchies. However, within your HTML file, it needs to be very hierarchical. Those are the rules. Okay, so I think we're finally past all the really boring stuff, and now we can start playing around with HTML tags. So we're going to play with the following tags. P is for paragraph. This is a really common tag. You'll use a ton. EM is for italics. Strong is for bolded characters, and then H1, H2, H0 are different types of headers. So, okay, so you can see that in my HTML file, I've got one paragraph that says hello world. I'm going to go ahead and add another paragraph. This is my opening paragraph. I don't know why I put it before the other one, but whatever, I can put it wherever I want. Everything's nicely nested. P starts within body and it ends within body, so it's all fitting together very beautifully. So if I save this, from now on I'm not going to explicitly go file save for you, I'm just going to hit the keyboard shortcut, but I'm going to save it so you know what's going on. I'm going to reload this page in my web browser, and you can see, okay, awesome. It's interpreting the changes that I made, and now I've got two paragraphs. Okay, I'm going to add another paragraph. This time, actually, it's not going to be a paragraph. It's going to be a header. H1 is HTML language for like a big header. So this is like the title, the header of my page. My page about making HTML. Start tag, end tag, the start tag and the end tags match, except the slash and the end tag, perfect. Save, reload, aha, see, couldn't do this in plain text. Now it's big, that's cool. What does H2 do? Well, H2 is just a little bit smaller. Subheading, save, reload. Okay, so you're starting to see how this works. The web browser interprets the code. As long as my code is valid, the web browser will make sense of it. So I told you about a few more fun codes, so let's do like EM is italics. So let's say I want to italicize the word making. I need to surround it in the EM tag. So start tag and then end tag. So now I'm saying that here's my new little element. I'm saying that the word making is going to come between the start tag EM and the end tag /EM. So that will be italicized. Save, reload. There it is, like magic. It has worked. The code has been interpreted. What did I say? Strong is one for bold. So how about the word world is going to be bolded? Save, reload. Awesome. I think that covers all of the first things that I wanted to show. Yep, got it. Okay, now let's do some more fun ones. Okay, these are the ones where you really feel like you're free from plain text at last. The A element, which is a link, and the IMG element, which is an image. So the A element requires an attribute. We've already seen this one, and the attribute is href, and that is the attribute value of href is the URL that you want to point to. So here's an example of how to make a link to Google. Let's go back, and I'm actually going to do a slightly different example for self-promotional purposes. Visit my website by clicking here. So that's just a paragraph I've added. I want the word here. I want users to be able to click on here, and I want them to go to my website. So I'm going to add start tag A, and then attribute value href equals http / I just happen to know my own website name. No surprises there. Okay, so I've got my nice long start tag, right? Pointy bracket, A, space, href equals, quotation marks, full website URL, end of quotation marks, and then to close off the start tag, right pointy bracket. So that starts the link, and then to say where the link, the extent of it, like I want this part to be highlighted and clickable, I'll add the end tag right after here. Okay, and now if I save and go to Chrome and reload, there it is, and oh my god, it's a link. Visit my website by clicking here, and then if I click on it, oh man, it took me to my very own website. That's very exciting. I actually still do get excited, although I've done this many times. It's pretty cool how this works. Okay, so that's how links work. Play around with those a bit. The other exciting one is the IMG element, which displays an image on your website. It's kind of a weird element in that it's an empty element, meaning it has no end tag. It doesn't surround anything, it just is its own element. It has lots of attributes that it can take, and 2 of them are required. So SRC is the location of the image that you want to display. Alt is a text description. That's for people who can't see images. Say a screen reader would, for people who are, for instance, blind, it would describe the image because they can't see it, but say it's really crucial to your website. It's very nice to have a text description of the image. You can also specify the height and width in pixels of the image. So let's go do that too. Okay, so I'm going to make a new line and I'm going to put an image in there. IMG, that's the name of the element, then SRC, usually here, boink. So here's an example of an IMG tag, and I'm just going to use this one exactly because, again, it's a very self-serving picture of my head that's huge. You will not want to do this because it will scare you, so you got to find your own image. So I'm going to close this down so I can just copy this. So instead of typing it out, I'm just going to copy the whole thing in, and then we can see how it works. So yeah, IMG SRC equals, and then that's the URL to my picture, and then alt describes it as a giant picture of my head. And then empty elements, see there's a start tag but no end tag. You put the slash within the start tag on an empty element. Sort of cool. So going back to Chrome and reloading it, oh, didn't save, I did. So there you'll see there is an absolutely gigantic picture of my head. So maybe we'll say use those height and width. Height, I'll say like, let's make the height 100 and width equals 75. I'm just guessing. Something that'll make it look okay. So there, that's better. I mean, maybe I want to make it more like 65 to preserve the ratio. But there's my head, and amazingly, there is an image in our website. So just to show you how to get an actual image you want to use and not just my head, let's say I want a picture of a panda bear, which are very cute. I would Google it, click on images. This one will do, it's pretty cute. Say I'll pick that one. Then this is a really important step. I click on view image. And then here, that is the URL that I need. That's like the actual web address of that image. So I could go and make another image tag. So here I'm going to do img src equals quotation mark, and then I'm just pasting in that image that I just grabbed, that URL. And just in case you're not following with, you need to do like copy to copy the URL, and then when I'm here, I could also do file or edit, paste, and paste it in. Then I got to close quotation mark. Then I'm going to do that alt equals a very cute panda, and then close the empty src element, save, go back to my website, reload it, and now that beautiful panda is on my own website. Okay, so that is the end of the basic HTML thing. So you can see there are still some things we can't do. We're not changing colors, their website still looks kind of crappy. CSS is going to control all of that magic for us. Next video.